Okay, this is the next in my series of educational videos on centronuclear myopathy, and particularly this video will focus on the inheritance patterns for the centronuclear myopathies. And by inheritance, what I mean is the way that a condition is passed down from one generation to the next, the way that it is inherited, the way that the genes and chromosomes pass from parents to their offspring. And in general, within genetics, inheritance patterns are characterized as being either X-linked or autosomal, and we'll talk about that in the context of centronuclear myopathy. So just a little background first. X-linked means that the condition or gene is located on the X chromosome. The X chromosome is one of the two sex chromosomes. Chromosomes that dictate the gender of the offspring are the X and Y chromosomes. So the X is one of those. And in general, males have an X and a Y chromosome, whereas females have two X chromosomes. Autosomal chromosomes are the non-sex chromosomes. So basically the dozens of other chromosomes that are present in all of the human cells. So then let's take this a step further. The X-linked conditions, since a mother has, since a woman in general has two X chromosomes, if she has one that is normal and one that is abnormal, she is going to be a carrier for that abnormal version of the gene, but she'll have another version of the gene that's normal, so that she'll probably be clinically okay. So again, women have two X chromosomes. If one is abnormal, the normal one will kick in and sort of compensate for the one that's abnormal, and therefore the woman will be a carrier of the abnormality, but she herself will probably not have significant or substantial symptoms, or certainly not as full-blown as that of her affected son. Boys inherit the X chromosome from their mom and the Y chromosome from their dad, and therefore out of the two X chromosomes that the mother had, if one was normal and one was abnormal, there is a 50% chance for each of her sons as to whether he is going to inherit her abnormal X chromosome or her normal X chromosome. If he inherits the abnormal X chromosome, then he will be affected by the X-linked condition. Autosomal chromosomes, we have pairs of all of these chromosomes. So, for chromosome number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. There's two of each on those, one that comes from the mom and one that comes from the dad. And within your autosomal genetic condition would be one that's on one of these non-sex chromosomes. And within that, it's broken down into whether the condition is considered dominant or recessive, depending upon how many copies of that abnormal version of the gene do you need in order to cause the disorder. So if an abnormal version of the gene, so a mutation for example, is causing a dominant medical condition, dominant inheritance pattern, what that means is that if you have two copies of this gene, even if one copy is abnormal, that will be enough to cause the disorder. That's the opposite of what you see with a recessive condition, where you need both copies of the gene, both versions of the gene, one on each of the two chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad, to be abnormal in order to have the condition. So then, just to summarize again, you have X-linked conditions and you have autosomal conditions, and the autosomal conditions are broken down into autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. So if you just remember these three different types of inheritance patterns, you'll understand at least the basic framework that you need to know for centronuclear myopathies, and really for all genetic conditions: X-linked, autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive. So what I've done here is to create a table, just to display in hopefully a clear, easy to read, easy to understand way, the different genes that are involved in the different versions or subcategories of centronuclear myopathies. What gene is involved, what protein is it coding for, and what is the inheritance pattern for each of those specific subtypes of centronuclear myopathy. Starting off with the most common of these and the longest known version, which is the MTM1 gene mutation, causes problems with a protein called myotubularin, and this causes an X-linked inheritance pattern, and this is typically referred to as X-linked myotubular myopathy. Sometimes you'll see that is abbreviated as X-linked MTM, or XL MTM for X-linked myotubular myopathy. The X-linked MTM affects essentially boys exclusively. Women, if they're